you go from 19 and under, then you turn 20, and then you're competing against guys who are 30, 31, 28, 27, who've been doing it for way longer. And in Europe, they start at like 5, 6 years old. I started, 12, and they've been doing it for consistently. And, you come in, you have a veteran who's 28, 29, who knows the game. It's a very, very different ball game.
Welcome to episode 128 of The Route, presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that is a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. As always, I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we get into today's guest, we just have a couple things to go over as per usual. First off, if you're watching this on video here, you can see at the top hand corner, it says The Route. Beneath that, it says at The Route Sports. That is our handle on all social media. That's Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, etc. We're on everything, including LinkedIn. So if you're listening to this, most of our listeners are within the sports business space. It's a great area to kind of maybe further your network, advance it, continue to grow it. I'm on there. You can connect with me, and you can connect with the guests and all the people interacting with it as well. So check that out on LinkedIn and all the other platforms. At The Route Sports, we have these little magazine covers we do when the episode releases, and then on the other platforms we have clips for the episode, so you can see little snippets and tidbits of each guest. So check that out at The Route Sports. Now, leading to the next thing before we get into today's guest is, if you're listening, if you're watching, just take a couple of minutes to subscribe to the podcast, follow the podcast, rate 5 stars. It allows the podcast to grow a little bit easier on all major platforms. So on YouTube, it's at White Whale Marketing, and underneath that, we have the Route playlist where you can find all of our video episodes available there. With that said, we have a quick little message from our friends at BetStamp.
Damn it, I lost another bet. I always do this. Why can't I win at least one?
You need an edge in sports betting.
BetStamp allows you to compare the best available odds among sports books. To get an edge in sports betting, download the BetStamp app and use the code WHALE to get access to all the affiliates and pricing. The only way to get an edge in online sports betting is by having accounts with multiple sports books.
Yes.
BetStamp.
With that said, now let's get into today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who represented Canada at the Rio 2016 Olympics and who is now working as marketing advisor of Petro-Canada sponsorship programs at Suncor. Joseph Polosafikis, welcome to The Route. How's it going?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I stumbled on your last name a little bit there.
Everyone does. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't that. I've seen way worse.
I know. I think we were talking about that right before the podcast, but I was like, oh, man, I messed that up last minute. But let's see if we can make it back by getting through this episode well. So as I kind of mentioned, and for those who've watched the podcast endlessly here, the theme is The Route, right? So how did you get involved in sport? How did maybe you start your career as an Olympian? And how did you get to where you are today? So do you mind maybe sharing your route with us?
Yeah, so it was not that conventional. I started a sport career, more specifically for the first time when I was 12 years old in fencing. And I was born and raised in Montreal, and I went to this all-boys French private school, and fencing there was a really big thing. So trying to make the team was like a big deal. And there's around 60, 70 people that were trying out. And when you sort of show up at the school, they're sort of showcasing it. And as a kid, I loved Zorro and Star Wars and all that stuff. And that made it very appealing to try out, to be able to hit other people on the head with a sword and be applauded for it, instead of told it was a bad thing to do at the time, was really appealing. So I ended up making the team, and it was, to me, a little bit of a miracle, because the first tryout, they were making us run a mile before doing any kind of fencing training for the tryouts. And that mile, I was not going to make it at the time. I was good at like speed and soccer type sprints, but running miles, I'd never done that, and I was not going to make it. So I actually ended up getting out there a little bit late because my class ran late, and I missed it. And the coach came out and said, "You're off the team. You missed a mile. You're done." And I was like, "No, sorry, my class was late." And he said, "Okay, well, I'll have to verify that. I'll give you another chance to run this. We can't do it now, but come in, and then during this week I'm going to make you run it. So in my head, I was going to eventually get cut anyway, so I might as well get a free fencing tryout for day one, and I was happy. What ended up happening over 2 weeks of tryouts is that he forgot to make me run it again, and I ended up making the team just based on some abilities he saw in me and other aspects of fencing. And when I made that team up, for me, it was like a miracle. So I said, I'm never giving up this team until all the other 20 guys that were chosen quit before me, because for me, it was like a sign that I have to keep on doing this. So that really helped me throughout my career to all these stages. And that sort of started, but it took me around 12 years to be the last one standing from that group, because there was another couple of talented guys. And I actually stuck to my word that I would be the last one standing from that group. So that was pretty interesting. But from day one, I started loving it, and I had a lot of ups and downs on the way. I started ranking the provincial ranks to the senior national ranks, the cadet juniors. Started making the national team to start traveling abroad. Made some really good results internationally. We finished in the top 8 in the world, and then eventually we finished top 2 as a team in the world as a juniors in 19 and under. And that was the first time in history that Canada had achieved that. So then in the senior careers, I started trying to make the next Olympics after around 10 years of training. In 2021, 2020, I was 2010 is when I was like really making a run at trying to make the London Olympics, and I was training 2 times a day and in university at the time. So I was going to McGill and training university. So training 2 times a day, studying in the middle, and I was doing part-time school, but the goal was London, and didn't end up making it. So that was a tough call for me. And what happened after that was that I decided that when I didn't make London, it was a really big blow to me, and I thought, I've been wasting so much time, and I didn't achieve my big goal, even though I had done a lot on the way there, some really good results, but it didn't happen. So I told myself I'm going to keep going back into school and make sure that I finish my degree. And I ended up graduating in 2014, where I still kept up training, but a little bit less at the time. And I had to make a decision of, okay, graduating, do I go look for a job, or do I keep going and try to make the next Olympics and make a run? And I ended up at the time getting a job. I applied for a job as if I was going to start that next year, and I ended up getting a job at a telecom company at the Bell. And they actually said, they gave me the job after I did a bunch of interviews, and I said I was going to start in September. Then as soon as it was time to accept the job, I realized I wasn't ready to start working it. I wanted to try my dream one more time. I told them that. I said, listen, I'd like to start for you guys, but I'm not really ready to do it right now. And they said, okay, no problem. We'll wait for you for 2 years, because it was a leadership program that had a new cohort every year. So they said you could start in 2016 if you want to try and make the Olympics, and we'll have this spot waiting for you. So that was like another incredible opportunity for me, because I had that peace of mind that I would be starting in the business world after 2016, regardless if I qualified or not. So that just gave me this full confidence that, like, okay, let me go for it. And it had sort of like a backup plan. So I ended up a week after that, after my graduation, after getting this job and postponing and I'm going all in now to try to make Rio. I was doing this cross training activity, and I got a really bad concussion, which knocked me out. Ended up being so I was back in after a month of finishing university. I got knocked out, like not knocked out, but I got hit, and sort of took me out of commission for over 8 months, almost to a year. And I was not able to train. I wasn't able to sleep. I couldn't travel. I couldn't watch TV. I couldn't be in a room with more than 4 people. So I was, instead of training for the next Olympics and going around the world and doing training camps and competitions, preparing to try and make the team, I was, seeing specialists 3 times a week, trying to get back just on my feet, to get back to doing just a basic fencing, move. So that was a really tough time for me. And what ended up happening was that I eventually came out of that after a lot of work, and just getting back on the strip for me was just a miracle in itself. And I was just so proud and happy to be able to be living normal life again, because that was like the worst time of my life. It was almost like a depression. So I got out of that, and eventually I started feeling a little bit better. And at the last minute, there was a couple of last competitions where I did really well. Finished top 8 in the world at the seniors, and did second at the Pan Am Games in Toronto. And it shot me up in the rankings, where I was able to make it into the top 30 top 25, 30 in the world overall in the world rankings, and I qualified for Rio after a really crazy process that I didn't think would ever happen. So it went from like the worst year of my life to sort of the best one. And then after Rio, I went to the Olympics. Excellent experience. I started working at Bell for a bit for 2 years. And in 2018, I had another opportunity to come back to training and trying to make Tokyo. And I was actually offered to apply for a role at Petro-Canada in Montreal as a manager of a whole territory of sites and managing the business relationships with all our partners there. But they would also offer me flexibility to also train while competing, while working. So I would able to do both, have like a type of schedule that would be accommodating because the Petro-Canada is also an Olympic partner. So I went back into training, but working at the same time, which was very hard, and started trying, they would give me as much, time off that I needed to do my competitions. So I started doing that, and after 2 years, the pandemic hit at the end of the qualifying. I was out, we weren't competing after for a year. I was in the top 30 in the world at the time, trying to make Tokyo. I was very close, and then just the pandemic hit, so all the competitions were off. I was just working from home and kept up the job. And then when things opened up again, I realized I was second in the continent, and you had to be first. And there was one competition left, so I wasn't going to be able to make that gap. So I ended up, even I was in the top 30 in the world, but it wasn't enough. So it was hard. I didn't qualify for Tokyo, but I still had this role. But what came out of this actually being with Petro-Canada is that at the same time, there was a new role that opened up in Calgary because Petro-Canada's offices were moving from Toronto to Calgary. And I was in Montreal doing an operations role, but this role about managing their sponsorships of the Olympics, Team Canada, the COC, the CPC, and the Coaching Association of Canada, and other sponsorships. So that role opened up in Calgary, and they offered it to me. And it was kind of a really interesting time where, I didn't make this Olympic dream again, but I'm now on the other side, managing the partnership with Team Canada in the Olympics and doing cool things way on the other side. So since that time, I took the role. I moved to Calgary, and here I am now. So that's been the route so far.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And that's what the podcast is all about. And there's so many more things I want to get into, but that's kind of a perfect way to kind of start it off, right? So
yeah, it was a bit of a long route there, but there was a lot to cover.
That's perfect. Depending on the guest, we've had guests go, an hour and a half, just kind of getting to all the intricacies. Other guests go, 2 minutes. So no, it's great. It depends all about what you want to share. So no, that was fantastic, and I think you did a perfect job about explaining and kind of sharing the different stages of it all. So I think that was great.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, what I usually like to do is kind of go back and then work our way into the future. Or I should say present day, let's say.
To the present.
So, yeah. So what I kind of wanted to get into was how you kind of got started in fencing. I know you were mentioning when you're at school, at that private school, and it was something like, hey, I'm going to try out something very popular at the school. But what I was curious about, because our last guest on the podcast was an Olympian for field hockey, right? It's kind of a sport that's not, let's say, traditional. It's not hockey, soccer, doesn't have a ton of, let's say, athletes or, let's say, viewers. But how does that skill set then get developed, and how does competitions go? I know you're saying there's different levels, and then eventually you made the national team. Yeah. But is it something you found you just had a natural skill set for, or was it a lot of work that you had to put into it to become, this eventual Olympian?
Yeah, so it's, no matter what sport or no matter how much talent you have to put in a lot of work. That's not obvious in the beginning when you start, because what I did initially start is that I did have some talent when I first started. I had a quick hand-eye coordination. I was quick on my feet. I was able to understand tactics and how to outwit, but also be quick. So I sort of had some of those capabilities initially. And my first year, I ended up doing pretty well for my age category, which was under 13. I was 12 years old, and at the Quebec senior level. At the Quebec under 13 regional, provincial level, but I hadn't done anything nationally yet. And I just realized, okay, I'm pretty good at this. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to keep progressing. But I actually was putting in a little bit less work than I should have when, the next year I actually went into another division. So when you turn 13, you're under 15, so it's the 15 and unders. And I was struggling. I realized like, okay, the stuff that was working last year, all of a sudden that is not working. Even people that started at the same time as me were starting to like develop ways to beat me, and like finding ways around it and progressing. And they were doing these summer camps that I hadn't done because I had left on for I was with family, and I was realizing, okay, like some people are getting more serious about this. And then I came back, stronger the third year, where I started really finding ways to get myself better. And it's a lot of work on just consistent daily basis. We were training, pretty much at the time it was like 3 to 4 days a week at 13, 14. But I really started to hit my stride at like 15. And had one of the best seasons ever, where I started making podiums at the 17 and under categories, and even the 19 and under at some points. And I was really like starting to understand how to use my talents and to work hard at it. But even then, when I hit 16, 17, I hit another wall when I was trying to get into the national team for Team Canada to travel to the World Championships. And I actually had a bad year. I got injured. And, when you start hitting 17, 18, you have all the other distractions from, there's CEGEP, there's end of high school. And that's when a lot of people start stopping, right? And I got an injury where I tore my meniscus, my right knee. And I was having back problems at the time. And I remember just being injured and being, had a bad season, and I didn't make Team Canada. And some of my peers that had started with me, like another one, he made the Team Canada, and then some others from across the country completed it, and I didn't make it. And I was like, what am I doing this for? I'm injured already. I'm 17. I have like a torn knee. My back's hurt. I can't even touch my toes because I had herniated my disc at some point. And that was when I hit a wall. But I swear, I would think back to that initial promise I had made myself, which is I'm not quitting until everybody around me from that same year quits or stops. And one of the guys there was going to made the national team, and was going to the World Championships, and I wasn't. I was like, there's no way I could stop now. It's going to be forever. Like he was a better person, like a better fencer than me at the end of all this. And I it was a miracle I made this team, so I can't give up. So it literally kept me going to try and make the next level. And then the year after, I did make the team, and I was at the 19 and under, and ended up doing top 16 in the world, and also came in second as a team, which was a historic result at the time. It still stands as the best junior team event result for Canada in our history. So that really gave me a big boost. That I'm 19 now. I'm entering the senior levels, which is over 19, so like 20 and up, and got a good chance to like really do some damage and do well on even And there's a big jump from junior to senior. It's a huge jump of work, because you go from 19 and under, and then you turn 20, and then you compete against guys who are 30, 31, 28, 27, who have been doing it for way longer. And in Europe, they start at like 5-6 years old. I started 12, and they've been doing it for consistently. And you come in, you have a veteran who's 28, 29, who knows the game. It's a very, very different ball game. But on my first year in the senior circuit at 19, I managed to finish top 8 in the world at a senior event that had never been done before, especially by someone from Canada who was 19. Like, that was unheard of, and that really shot me really up in the rankings, and I was doing well, and I was like on a really good track to make London Olympics. But then I sort of started panicking, and that's where I sort of had a couple of other competitions where I didn't do so well, and it got passed by other people, and ended up not making it. But it was a good life lesson of how to manage stress, nerves, anxiety, and also not let that loss or not qualification define me, because I'd done so many great things, and grew so much and traveled so much before to get there, that the experience is what you have to really appreciate more than just the outcome, right?
Absolutely. So, and just kind of building on that as well, is that something that you found going to that school as a 12-year-old, where fencing was a big sport and you were competing against others that eventually made the national team as well? Do you think that had a big factor, where you had some high-level talent to kind of practice against, or even just refine your craft? And just kind of building on that question as well, I was curious, let's say you go home for the summer, or you're obviously not with your schoolmates throughout the summer, I would assume. How do you refine your skill sets, like on your own, let's say?
Yeah, so the first question is totally valid. I think the reason I even continued or got any good was because it was a good school for fencing. It created a good group that was, compete against each other, but we were also all in the same school, started the same year. Everyone starts on the same level, like because nobody has really done fencing before that. Like it's not like a soccer, like basketball, soccer. Like there's different levels. Like people are like everyone sort of was day one. I've never done this, so we started at the same time. It's very rare for you at 12 years old to just start a new sport. Everyone at the same level, right? So that was very cool. And the fact that it's in your school means you have a lunchtime practice. You go downstairs and it's right. There's like a fencing hall in the school. After school, you just stay there. You go to your locker, then change and go. You don't have to go switch to another studio, to another training area, and that really makes it much easier to stick to it and be consistent. So you have the good team chemistry. You have the good environment and coaching, and you have the good, access and proximity. And I think that really made it much easier to keep going. And definitely one of the reasons I was able to keep going and getting better, because I was very lucky about where I started fencing, and that changed everything. About the second question about off season. Initially, it's tough because you get out of school and then the school's closed. So there's times that it's off. So you have to do stuff on your own. Other sports is actually good just to stay in shape out of the actual school year. But there was also training camps that would be done, at the end of July, beginning of August. There were other training camps that in the US they would organize, where you would go for like 2 weeks and have, train with the Americans, and they were a very, very good team. And then even my own school would organize on like an early August training fencing camp where you would go and start training and getting ready for all those for the next season. That was an important part, because they know that you have to get back into shape before you even start fencing again. And that was at the time what was done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just find it's always just interesting to hear how different sports work and how that kind of comes about.
Yeah.
I kind of have, let's say, an odd question to maybe ask as well, just to kind of compare the skill level. So let's say an average Joe hops on the mat to kind of compete against you. Do you think they'd be even able to score 1 point against you, or was that just a clean sweep where there's no chance in the skill level from an average person and someone who's refined their craft for such a long time is so far?
So the first thing I'd say with that is that there's in fencing, there's 3 weapons. So a lot of people don't know that. There's the saber, the épée, and the foil. And I do the saber, which is you hold it up and it's way more dynamic, very quick. And the difference is there's a lot of differences. They're actually different sports, and I've never done the other 2, but I know about them, right? I've been around them. But the equipment's different, the rules, the competitions, where they're happening, the people you train, how you train, like the abilities you need. The only thing that's the same is the strip you guys fence on. It's the same length, but everything else is completely different. So there are some sports like the épée one, which people have mostly seen, which everybody's all in white. And you could, you could attack the feet, you could attack the arms, you could attack anything. And when you both touch each other, it's like 1-1, right? Yeah. So in that one, I would say like maybe someone who's new they could get a point. Maybe they won't win at all, but they can maybe at times hit at the same time as the pro and get a point. But most of the times they'll get blocked out. They'll have like, they won't know what to do. The difference is that saber is that even if you guys touch each other at the same time, it's not 1-1. It's the point to whoever has the attack priority, and that's determined by the referee. So there's a lot of subjectivity of who is the aggressor, who's doing the attack. So because I have so much experience, I will, someone will come in and they'll try to hit me, but if they miss me, that means all of a sudden they missed their attack. And then if we touch each other at the same time, that'll be my point because they missed their chance, and then it's my turn. So I would just, try to like egg them on, and they don't really know their distances yet or how to really, get me from a distance, and they'll maybe try to attack me too quick, and then they'll miss and then just keep trying to hit me with their sword and coming at me. But as soon as they miss once and then we hit each other at the same time, it's my point. So I think it'll be hard in saber to get a point against me because I'm able to use the strategy and tactics of like understanding the attack priority and how to win it and lose it, more of it than just them touching me, because they'll be able to touch me, but they won't be able to get it with them having the attack priority, I think. So it'd be an interesting challenge.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I just think it's always interesting because I think the other day I was hanging out with friends and there was something that came up about how many points you could score on various levels of basketball player, right? And how much money you would be willing to bet or something. So I just find kind of thinking about that in different sports is always just interesting because the average Joe is like, oh, I could score this amount in a basketball game, this, that, and the other. But then when you actually do it,
for saber, it'd be very hard for them to score points because you really have to understand what you're doing. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I guess just kind of building on all that as well, you're then discussing how you attended McGill. You're obviously being a student athlete where you're competing to hopefully make the Olympics, and then also just being a full-time student. Do you mind maybe building on what that was like? Because obviously, all universities have different sports, but then I believe in my thought process, training to become an Olympian, and then also maybe just playing university basketball in Canada or university soccer in Canada is a little bit different, I'd assume.
Yeah, and I was not part of the McGill fencing team. I was on a separate program, which was the national team program, and we had a coach that came from Russia that was training us only. That's the four of us trying to make the London Olympics, and we would, it was very separate from McGill. So what I would do is at every class, I would have to, at the beginning of a semester, I would go see a professor and be like, hey, like, I'm going to be, training 2 times a day, this morning and night, and then I'm going to be leaving for these competitions. What can we do? I'm going to be missing some midterms. So I had to negotiate with every professor on how I'm going to, make up for a midterm or a final. It was a mess, but I got through it. I was studying and getting through all that, but it was a very tough time because I would go training in the morning from like 9 to 11 or 10 to 12. Then I'd go to school from 1 to 4 for a class. And then I'd go back to training from 5 to 7:30. And then I'd go home, try to study, try to eat, try to shower, try to get ready for the next day. And then I'd have training 2 times a day, 5 days a week, and then Saturdays as well, in the mornings. And then we'd have training camps abroad. We'd go for like 3 weeks sometimes we would leave for 6 weeks to Europe. So I'd miss so much school and I would have to, catch up from a distance, but we would go train in, let's say, France or Italy or Ukraine, do camps with the guys over there, and then go do a competition or 2 World Cups. That was really important, and then come back. So you try to like get over the jet lag, get some training with better guys, because combat sport, you need to fight against some good guys. You can't always be against the same 2-3 people. And in Canada, we have a lower basin of high performance guys, so we always try to go abroad. We're going to Germany a lot, and trying to integrate with their team and learn from them, become friends with them too. And some of the best memories of my life, but also some of the toughest times. It was, you're always, in another hotel, in another plane, in another, airport lounge, eating whatever. And it was a lot of training. You're jet lagged, you're tired, you're stressed because you have to perform at these competitions. There was like 200 people from 60 countries. All the Europeans, they just take they hop on a bus or a train or a car right away, and they're there for the competition, right? Like they barely miss a weekend from home, and us, we've just been gone for weeks. And it plays a toll on you physically and mentally.
No, I could only imagine what that's like. This past December, I decided to go on a vacation. We're in Europe. And obviously, because I have my own business, I'm able to work remotely. I remember I'd get some emails and trying to work at a little coffee shop or a hotel room. And I was like, oh, this is awful. Like, I just want to go home. And like, obviously I was enjoying the trip, but just kind of work, because managing the two of, traveling or kind of being abroad and then also focusing on, let's say, school for you, but also you're competing. I'm sure it's just exponentially harder. I'm positive of that. So that's kind of incredible to hear. And obviously, you're touching there on some of the memories you had. Kind of keep that in mind for later, because there's a question I'd like to ask at the end about that. So before we get into that, you were then also discussing about how, you finished university, you were looking for a job, and you got to the point where like, you know what, I got to chase the dream one last time. Do you mind maybe touching on that and what specifically just kind of sparked you to be like, hey, like I got one more, let's say, go at this?
To be honest, it was almost at the same time that I was calling to tell them I was accepting the job. So initially, when I got an offer from Bell, I also got an offer from this other it's this big insurance company, and my initial thought was, which one between the two? And I'm going back and forth, and I was going to see both of them and seeing what the opportunities were. I went to Toronto for a final round interview for this insurance company. Like I was really into it, right? I was like, okay, I'm moving on. But it was just something very strange I felt when I was about to make that call to Bell and say, I accept the offer. I called them and I said, I do accept the offer, but like, it's almost like as soon as I was saying it, I realized I can't do this right now all the way. I have this internal, something's not right. Like I feel like I have to keep going, at least another run. And I just laid it out. I was just super honest. I wasn't, I loved, like, the role that I got for Bell was, they only took like 7-8 students from Quebec, and it was like a pretty, pretty cool program. It was a rotational program across the company, a leadership program, and it was it was an honor to get it, but I just wasn't ready yet, and I felt it, so I had to say it. And I think that's a good lesson, is like when you feel something, just say it. You never know what's going to happen, right? And the options, I asked them, listen, is there anything that could be done? And it just happened to be that that's a program that happens yearly out of university. There's you take a couple of students. So they said, we could figure out we put you in 2016. And I was very grateful for that too, right, at the time. And that just changed a lot. Looking back, I might have not gotten that concussion, which was also life-changing, and I still have problems to this day because of that. But that was also part of the journey for me to get to the Olympics as well. So you can't regret any part of it, because I made the decision for the right reasons, and then the rest of that is all part of the journey, right? It all leads to where you're supposed to go. So it's hard to regret things.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. To be honest, I think that's kind of almost, throughout these podcasts, I think kind of the main thing that maybe people listen to is, hey, what can I take away from each guest and how can I apply it to myself? That's how I do it, even though I'm just having coffee chats with people. And I think that gut instinct you have, sometimes it's almost like, I've read quotes of, hey, when you feel like it's time to jump, right? Don't think, just do it. Yeah. And I know we talked about it prior to get on the recording where, both of us started off in accounting. And when I was in accounting, I got offered a job once I graduated. And as soon as they offered me the job, it was like, jump, get out of accounting, get into sports, and very different circumstances. But I think sometimes that gut instinct kind of, tracks in the right direction without you knowing sometimes. So that makes a ton of sense. And then I guess building on that as well, right? One of the things you just touched on it there as well. You talked about the issues you've had with concussions, and then just kind of sticking with the sport when you had those low points. Do you mind maybe explaining that a bit further, and what was that like, and how you're able to kind of even just manage that stress and that low point? Because obviously life isn't all about sunshine and rainbows, even though sometimes with social media we like to make it out that way. But I'd love to kind of hear that if you're willing to share.
Yeah, I'd say high performance sports has a lot of rocky paths and parts to it. Concussion was one of the, but I had a lot of not concussion, but a lot of other injuries. I mean, the herniated discs in my back was really bad too. I couldn't tie my own shoes. I couldn't sit. I couldn't stand. I couldn't walk. And I was in school. I like studying at home. I had to sit on my forearms studying on the floor for months because the disc was pushing on the nerve, so it was like going all the way down the leg. And I had that some bad back problems. And that was before the concussion. And then after the concussion, what happened was that it took me months, and those low points are very low, especially in concussions, because you don't know when you're going to get out of it. There's no one that can tell you. They're like, it could be a month, it could be a year, nobody knows. And I was seeing 3 different types of specialists, one to work with my eyes, my vestibular system. I was seeing a kinesiologist. I was seeing a specialized concussion doctor. I was doing all these tests, and I was like 3 times a week instead of training, I was trying to get better, right? And it reminded me of the times when I was injured in the past, when I would have to do physio every day and try and come back from an athletic therapy and exercises. And you come back from these and you appreciate your, being healthy a lot more, and you mentally, it makes you stronger. Even though in the moment you feel sort of defeated, you have to just see it as like, I'm going to get out of this. And the concussion was the hardest because I didn't know I was going to get out of it. I didn't know if it was going to ever be better. And it ruins all your life. It's not just, my back problems are really bad, but even knee problems, that's bad, but you could still do other things. Yeah. Concussion, I couldn't. I was looking at a ceiling, right, for a lot of the days. And I couldn't. Every time it was a slow process, and it wasn't just I'm missing work. It's I'm actually, every day that I'm here, there's other people around the world training super hard to try and make the same goal that I'm trying to make, and I'm not putting that effort in right now. So you're thinking of that, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so behind. How am I going to get out of this? So when I got out of the concussion, I wasn't even thinking about that anymore. I was just like, I'm just grateful I could get back on a fencing strip. That's all it was. And I was just almost in tears just being able to do a match. Whereas before that, I was just stressed about the results and where I'm going to go and how much I'm going to train. And at this point, I was just like, I'm just happy I could get back on this, and I'm going to finish this, do the best I can, finish this in style. And then the results sort of came naturally because I sort of let that pressure of the results go and just like appreciate and be grateful for the opportunity I was able to have again to be back doing what I loved. And the results actually came that way. Whereas in London, I was super into it, super 2 times a day and all that. I was doing good results, but then, worried I wouldn't be able to keep it up, and that ended up happening. So that was a crazy life lesson, and not letting just results define you, or that pressure get to you. Just think of that anxiety, just enjoy what you're doing in the process, and just appreciate it, have that gratitude, and the rest will take care of itself. And even if you don't make it, it doesn't define you, because everything you've done up to that point is what defines you, not the actual result, right? So
yeah,
learn that from
that makes a ton of sense. And even though you're talking about maybe your Olympic journey, even just kind of recovering from a concussion and other injuries, very much applicable to maybe someone who's listening in school or in an office, et cetera, where sometimes if you just let yourself breathe a bit, the rest kind of falls into place. So no, I think that's an awesome lesson to share. And I guess kind of now transferring to your career a bit, right? I think networking is one of the most important things, right? When I was in school, and even when people come on the podcast, the biggest thing everyone said, it's not about your network, it's your net worth, right? That's kind of the big saying that everyone says. And obviously with you being an athlete and an Olympian, I kind of want to change that perspective and kind of come at it from a different angle. So being an Olympian, obviously maybe some doors open, some people you're able to meet. How are you able, and what types of tips do you have for current athletes or former athletes to, leverage your title as an Olympian or as a professional athlete to kind of maybe open some doors for potential roles afterwards?
Yeah, it's tough. Fencing doesn't have a lot of sponsorships or professional avenues. So I had to, that was a big reason why I stayed in school. And what I made sure is that when I was in school, eventually, especially after the London qualification, when I went back, I was like, okay, I'm not just going to be studying and leaving. I'm going to get implicated. Like, I'm going to apply myself to other programs around this business school stuff. So I was getting into case competition leagues. I was trying to do, after school activities, join groups. And then I met some of my best friends and people that, like, in those years that I actually invested in things also outside of school, because I was taking a little bit less time for just 2 times a day training, right? So I think no matter what you're doing as an athlete, there's always some kind of avenue, either through school or through work, that you could actually do that little extra effort to meet up with people in other environments outside of just your sport. Because that also, studying for me, having school actually helped me overcome bad days in sport. And you need to have that other outlet, right? So, or if you have, days where, you hate your teammates, you get into fights, or you had a bad day with your coach and you're like, I don't like anyone in my sport anymore. I don't like my sport. And you're just like, if that's your only world, that's when you start to really get, kind of helpless. Like, I have no other opportunities. But if you say, like, okay, this is just one part of me right now, it's a big part, but long-term, I know this is not forever. So let me cultivate those other relationships. And that was some of the best things that could have ever happened, because the people I met through McGill, and then the counselors and the teachers, and then other events that, as an Olympian or athlete, you get invited to things as well. And I wasn't an athlete at the time, but there was always all these opportunities as an athlete to go to things. And a lot of the times athletes just be, no, I don't have time. I'm here, I'm there. When I was able to do it, I would go. I would meet new people in the business world, or in the sports world, in the cultural world. And that really helped me. And just knowing that I do that felt like I was like, okay, I'm a complete person. I'm not just defined by my sport, and I have a lot of things to offer outside of sport too, and just keep working on that. So that gave me a lot of confidence to keep it up.
Yeah, and I think, like, you're just referring to that balance, right? And kind of defining yourself more than an athlete and all the different things. And you're probably, Joseph first and athlete second. It's just a part of you. I think that makes total sense. And then the last kind of question I have before maybe we wrap up is obviously more so about your current role. I know you were discussing how they're very much flexible when you're kind of looking at going at it one more time for your career. How did that current role come about with Petro-Canada, and what are the types of things you're doing now for maybe those interested?
Yeah, so the initial role was in Montreal as an operations manager for this whole territory of Quebec, for the partnerships that we had with different partners that run a lot of the sites across Quebec. So I was managing those corporate partnerships. But that role initially, I was actually working for Bell, and somebody at Bell actually, we were having dinner or something, and then he had another friend that came over, and I talked to him about my Olympic background, or he knew me from somewhere. And he said, oh, I had seen you on some TV thing about the Olympics. And he's like, okay. And he's like, I have I have a friend who might they sometimes sponsor Olympians or athletes. I should put you into contact. And I was like, okay, why not? And then he put me in contact with his friend who worked at Petro Canada, and he was a territory manager, and he wanted me to come to an event to show some fencing for some employees, and see if that could lead to maybe some kind of sponsor thing. So I just went, and I met a bunch of people there, and then shortly after that there was a role that opened up that he thought of me because what I was doing at Bell a little bit, and he said, "Oh, you should come and apply. It's a great company too." And I was just like, I'm not really looking right now, but we'll see. And I went there and I asked for a certain demand. I said, listen, if I come here, it's because, I'm thinking of maybe going back into this for a little, one last run again. But I don't want to do it at any cost. Like, I want to be able to still work. So if I come to this role, I would, need a little bit more flexibility just in the beginning, just for this next year and a half or two. And I put some, conditions that I wanted. And Petro Canada, like I said, is also an Olympic sponsor. And the boss who would end up hiring me agreed at the time and said, like, this is something we want to do. We support, we like supporting athletes. It's our Team Canada as sponsors, and it's our pleasure to try and help you make both work. So I moved into that role in Montreal and did that like for a bit as well, like the dual life. That was even harder than school, way harder. That was tough. Mentally, if I got a couple of more injuries, I was, you're leaving for a competition, but work emails add up, and it's people have to replace you when you're gone. You can't really just do things on your own time. Things are happening every day. And then you come back to work and you're missing some trainings because you can't just be there as much as you'd like to. So I was kind of like it wasn't ideal. It was very hard. But at the end of that, like when all that is said and done and this role opened up here in Calgary, I was after the Tokyo, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go full time for this role. And I moved here, and it's been so great. I mean, I'm still involved in the sport world and trying to help athletes, but from the other side of being a sponsor and trying to, help athletes, coaches. We manage a lot of things here with the Canadian Olympic Committee, a lot of programs where we sponsor. It's the face. So the program I was trying to maybe be on is now the one I'm managing on the other side, which is crazy. So it's like the face program. We sponsor athletes and their coaches, and then we help families with their ticketing programs at the Olympics. So we give 2 tickets to every athlete's family at the Olympics for them to go see their event. And we're involved with the Canadian Paralympic Committee. So all amazing stories there, amazing things we do with the athletes there, and the Coaching Association of Canada. So all the coaches are regulated with how to become better coaches. So we try to help that conversation because we understand how important coaches are to athletes. So anyway, the whole thing to say is that the role is just super in line with mixing business with sports, and at the amateur level, how important this is for athletes to have that support. So I couldn't have asked for a better role right now, and it's kind of a dream role.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's almost a complete circle moment where you're kind of the athlete trying to get into that program, and now you're managing it. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess before we kind of wrap up the podcast, I have 2 questions I'd like to ask guests before we wrap it up. So I'm set. I think it's 120 episodes now, 28 that is, where I keep saying I'm going to live until I'm 103. I'm going to be on a rocking chair and listen to this podcast to remember about all the good times I've had throughout my career. So let's say you become 103 as well. You're on a rocking chair, going back and forth thinking about all these amazing stories and memories you've had throughout your career. Is there one that's absolutely going to stand out when you're 103?
It would definitely be one of the first competition. I guess one of a couple of months after coming back of my concussion, and going to a World Grand Prix in Russia, and finishing in the top 8 in the world again. And that was only the second time it had been done, and the first time was me, but this was the second time it did it. But to have done that result after coming back from a concussion, and that same day, or sorry, that same weekend. So the first day is prelims, and the next day is the finals. And the prelims, I had completely torn second-degree tear on my ankle. So I at the last match for me to qualify for the next day, and I did. And then the next day I was like, I wrapped it up. I'd come back from my concussion not too long ago. My ankle was done. I was like, oh man, another huge setback. I can't believe this. Like, actually ended up being out for like 4 to 5 weeks on that ankle. But in that day of that competition, I overcame that. Plus, you know, the restlessness from concussion, I came in the top 8 in the world, beat some of the best people in the world to get there. And I'll never forget that moment of just saying, like, if you just keep believing and just going towards what you can, like, some great things happen. And then so that sequence of that, and then after that at the Pan American Games in Toronto, it was a home crowd. It was like an Olympics, like every 4 years, and it's all the continents of the Americas are there. And I finished second in front of a home crowd. So my parents, my family, so everyone who had been there for me during the concussion, who had seen all that, and for me to just completely reverse the fortune and be on a podium in front of my family, it felt like an Olympics there. So like that sequence, I'll never forget how quickly you could turn around something. And it's not quickly, but like how in the same year, in the same span, if you just keep going at it, good things will come. And it just, I always think of that sequence in life when I'm having something difficult. I'm like, listen, you've been to the rock bottom, and you could see on the other side, you came out like as high as you can go, and then qualifying for the Olympics, right? And that is something that I'll always remember, that time there of how it went from 0 to 100 so quick, so quickly after coming out of something like that. I'll always have that story and memory in my head to motivate me for any other pursuit.
Yeah. That almost kind of perfectly transitions into the next question there, where at the end you're just kind of talking about maybe the lessons you learned. So obviously we went to the future, 103-year-old Joseph. But now let's say we go back into the past, and we're speaking with 16, 17, 18-year-old Joseph about to enter McGill. What's one piece of advice that you've now learned that you wish you could, share with a younger version of yourself, or a listener, or whoever is listening?
Yeah, definitely. It could be cheesy, but I saw it because of throughout my times trying to make an Olympics and not succeeding. And it's definitely about enjoying the process more than the results. And you have to enjoy the process you're doing, and not let yourself be defined by just the results, as either being, an Olympian or not, or, because when I didn't make it in London, and I was so devastated, and I told myself it's useless. I wasted 10 years of my life and I didn't get this, but I had forgotten everything else I had accomplished that gave me the skills and opportunities to become a better student, network better, learn how to, interact with people from all sorts of backgrounds and life skills. And I made friends around the world. Now when I go somewhere in any city in Europe, I have someone I can meet up with and hang out with. The learning to deal with adversity, coming back from setbacks, like all those things you learn, you don't even think about. You're like, I didn't make the Olympics, right? And you're just like, wait a minute, but you became such a better person because you're going after it. So any big goal you have, it's not really about attaining that. It's about what it forces you to do to become better, to try and attain it. You're already won. And you have to look back on those wins. So anytime it's going to be hard or you're going to have setbacks, just keep thinking about that, how much you've come and how much you could still keep going, and have that goal guide you, but don't let it define you.
Yeah. That's actually exactly why I like ending with that question, because I think it's a perfect way to kind of put a bookend on the episode. And this has been fantastic, and I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And unless there's anything else you'd like to share, I think, you did a phenomenal job. It was amazing hearing you out. And I think that's about it for episode 128.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chris, and congrats on what you've accomplished so far too. And I'm sure you enjoy the process. You wouldn't be doing so many episodes if you didn't. And I appreciate. I had actually started a podcast a while ago, and I did it for about a year. Just it got hard to keep doing it with editing and life, but it was talking to other Olympians too about things we learned from each other and from sports. So it was a cool. I see why you would like to do this too. It's cool to see.
It's not easy. I definitely had my moments where I've taken a pause, but during that pause, I was like, oh man, there's so much value to come out of it, where even if no one listens, just meeting these great guests and even just having these interactions and just learning from other people's experiences and stories, I had to keep going regardless. So that's awesome. And thank you to everyone for listening. And that's it for today's episode.